Welcome back to the channel. As you can see behind me here, the big truck project is pretty much done. I'd say, 98% done. There's always projects, but it's drivable, it runs great. And I've gotten a lot of questions about pretty much every part of the build, and so figured a video like this would help those that are interested learn about how I built it, why I did the things I did, and really the details of what went into the truck. And so, just as a quick introduction, I became interested in a big truck project probably around 2007, where my dream was put in a unique diesel drivetrain, put in big truck elements, not pickup truck parts. I wanted big truck parts. And in 2008, I kind of learned more about Diamond T trucks and their history, and I loved the style, and decided that I wanted to do a Diamond T truck project. But I was busy with life and building my street rod, and finished a street rod project in 2013 and got serious about looking for the truck. In 2014, I found this truck. It's a 1949 Diamond T 306H, which is a 1.5 ton farm truck. The H was a heavier duty model of the 306. And I found this truck in a farm field near Mancos, Colorado. That's in the southwestern part of Colorado. Southwestern Colorado has a very dry climate, and so fortunately the truck really has no rust. And so I was very fortunate there. Truck originally came with a 91 horsepower Hercules straight six gas engine, and had a rear end with, it was a 2-speed rear end, either 6.33 or 8.81 gearing. And that yielded a maximum speed of either 39 miles an hour or 53 miles per hour, depending on which gear ratio you'd selected. And so that really didn't fit my goals for the truck. And my goals were to have a truck that I could drive every day, highway speeds, and be safe doing so. And so with those goals in mind, I set out to replace the drivetrain and modernize it, still keep some of the old style, and I'm going to show you how I did all that. All right, well, after complete disassembly of the truck, I started on the axles. And the front axle here had a lot of challenges. First of all, the old axle had these huge drum brakes, a big stack of leaf springs, very stiff. And these items just weren't going to work for my goal of having a safe and reliable truck at today's highway speeds. And so got rid of that axle. Looking for a modern medium-duty truck axle was tough because I needed something very narrow. The track width on these old trucks is very narrow. It looks cool though, right? I mean, I really like the look of the narrow front and the big wide rear, and wanted to keep the truck with that same look. A lot of guys will cut the fender right here and add some material to widen the fenders out, put a wide pickup truck axle in it, call it done. It just does not look right to me. So I went through a lot of effort to keep this thing narrow. What I ended up finding was a 2006 UD 1400 truck, which is like a small Japanese cab-over box truck. And that axle was still too wide, but it was about the narrowest thing I could find that was medium duty. So what I did is an I-beam axle, cut 5.5 inches out of the center of it, and then it turned out to be just right. Not only was the track width the same, but the spring perches lined up perfectly with the leaf springs, and it went in pretty smooth after that. The suspension, I got rid of most of the leaf springs. I left the last couple of leaf springs at the top, and put an airbag between the top leaf and the frame. And so this gives me the advantage of air ride. I can raise and lower the front of the truck very easily. A little bit softer ride no matter what the truck is loaded with. And turned out to be a pretty good solution. It's not going to ride like a Porsche, but I think for the old truck here, found a good solution to answer most of the challenges that I had with the front suspension. The wheels, I've had a lot of questions on the wheels. So this axle ended up with a 6 on 8.75 inch stud piloted bolt pattern. That's what the donor truck had. And not a common size for 22.5 inch rims, which is what this truck has. And so I think these days you might be able to find people that'll machine whatever you want. But when I put this together a few years ago, I just could not find that option. And so I did a bunch of research and found that on some early 90s RVs, there was the six hole on 8.75 inch pattern with these 10 handholds. This is important. I wanted the 10 handholds to match the rear wheels. And so they're a super rare wheel made by Alcoa, part number 863100. I found these on eBay after 2 years of searching, and they turned out great, and they're narrow. These tires are 8R22.5, which is the closest match to the original size, which was 7.5 R20. But yeah, it turned out good. Like I said, these wheels are super rare. I think you might be able to get these machined now, much easier solution, but just wanted to make sure that folks had that Alcoa 863100 part number for this particular setup. All right, let's talk about the rear axle. The old Diamond T axle had very low gearing, as I mentioned, drum brakes, and a huge stack of leaf springs, very stiff. The new axle, I wanted disc brakes, high-speed gearing, and air suspension. And what I ended up with is an axle out of a 2004 International 4300, which is a much bigger truck. This is an Eaton 17060S rear end. I bought it as a rear end cutoff, and so I had the back frame section, the suspension and axle as a unit, which worked great because I could measure out all of the mounting locations and geometry and essentially just graft it right onto the Diamond T truck frame. Worked really good. This axle has 355 gearing in it, so very fast. Huge disc brakes, obviously big truck air suspension. Could not be happier with how that all turned out. It also has a parking brake or emergency brake on the input pinion, which is something that I was looking for, and I was able to control that with the Diamond T hand lever in the cab. The wheels are modern big rig, 22.5 inch diameter. These are 245/75 tires, and the stance all seems to work pretty good. I was able to find, it took me a long time to find these fenders, but stainless fenders with just the right width and radius to fit this tire size. Super happy with how it all turned out back here. All right, let's talk about steering. Steering was no doubt one of the most challenging parts of this build. I'm not gonna lie to you, I spent years trying to figure out how to make this work. Because of the way the Diamond T steering gear was mounted originally, and the geometry of this axle and the tight clearances, it just was not straightforward. What I ended up with is a power steering gear out of an early 80s Ford cab over, and it's plenty heavy duty, it's big, and it fit in the original spot where the Diamond T steering gear was. I definitely had to get creative on fabricating to make it work, but it fits in there. And it, you know, that was the final answer that I found. Power steering pump, also unconventional. There just wasn't any room left in the accessory drive area on the front of the engine. You know, I've already got an AC compressor, the alternator, it's just no clearance up there. And so what I ended up with is a electric power steering pump out of a modern Volvo SUV. And you may think that sounds crazy, but they are actually commonly used in aftermarket applications. And the specs made up to this particular power steering gear, and it works great. I have a switch where I can turn it on and off. It provides plenty of power to the gear. Steering is easy, and super happy with how that all turned out. While we're at this part of the truck, probably important to note about a particular strengthening I did for the frame here. I fabricated a piece of 3/8 inch plate that mounts on the outside of the frame here that ties together the rear spring hanger, the rear engine mount, the shock mount, the steering gear, the front spring hanger, and the front engine mount, cross member. All that is tied together with this piece of very heavy 3/8 inch plate. Similar piece on the passenger side. And I really thought that was important to make me feel comfortable with the weight of this engine and all the modifications up here. Yeah, but it all came together really nicely. Had to do lots of clearance issues to make it work, but it's big and strong and ties all these pieces together, so it's you know, plenty stiff for keeping the front of the truck safe here. All right, engine. Easy choice for me. It had to be a Detroit diesel, 2-stroke. I grew up in the oil field in Wyoming, and as a kid had a lot of experience with a variety of Detroit engines. I grew up driving a big white Road Boss truck with an 8V71. Our little cable tool rig has a 471. We have a mud pump with a 671. Our air compressor has a 12V71. I love them. They sound cool. They're fun to work with, and it was an easy choice for me. In a sea of Cummins projects, I'm glad it's different. This particular model is a 4-cylinder with 53 cubic inches per cylinder. That's the 453. This engine is a turbocharged model. It was turbocharged from the factory. I have upgraded the turbocharger to a Pulsar 300 series. I had a prior video about some of those details. This engine has 7 A77 injectors in it. It was rebuilt with crosshead pistons. Another important feature is a couple of years ago I found a set of Jacobs brakes for this engine. They're super rare. I was happy to find them. I got them installed. In order to make room on top of the head here for the valve cover, you can either try to find a taller valve cover, which is almost impossible to find. There are OEM valve cover spacers, also impossible to find. So I ended up building my own spacer in here, which was a fairly big project for me, but it turned out great. It's been working good. And so super happy about the Jacobs brakes. They run really good, they sound cool, and they actually really slow the truck down. Everything is tight up here. Yeah, you know, mounting the engine and the transmission was super challenging. In the front, I wanted to keep the radiator up here. Some people put them in the back or under or something. I wanted it to be conventional with radiator in front. The front engine mount, I actually modified and beefed up the original Diamond T crossmember. And the rear engine mounts I built from scratch. Spent a lot of effort on that, got everything just right, and that process went pretty good. Transmission in this truck is a Roadranger RTO-6610. This is a 10-speed manual from a big truck. You know, it's heavy duty, it's a good mate to this Detroit. It's fun to slip shift it. That old white Road Boss truck that I grew up driving also had a 15-speed Roadranger, so it's kind of nostalgic, both the engine and the transmission, and it's just a lot of fun to drive. Like I said, clearance issues everywhere. Can't go up, you got problems. Can't go down, you got, you know, every which way. But I got it in here just right. Did have to modify the firewall just a little bit. Ended up building a new firewall and kick panel piece just to fit the bell housing and just make sure that everything kind of cleared for that big transmission and the back of the engine there. Otherwise, fits in there okay. If you don't mind using a cutting torch and a welder. And really happy with how it all turned out. All right, under the seat area here, there's a lot going on. Really had to make use of all the space that I could. Here I've mounted a remote oil filter setup. Due to clearance issues with the front axle, I really didn't have room for a conventional engine-mounted oil filter. In this box here, I've mounted dual 200 amp circuit breakers to protect the 2-aught cable that I have run from the battery to the starter. The air suspension control system and valves are in this box here. And right here I've got a air over hydraulic dual master cylinder to power the brake system. The air over hydraulic setup is pretty cool because I was able to mount a master cylinder where I had room here under the driver's seat. And then there's a typical big rig air valve under the brake pedal. This air over hydraulic system gives plenty of power to the brakes. It does have a dual master cylinder here, one for the rear axle and one for the front axle, and they're sized appropriately for the size of those brakes. So far, it's really been working great. All right, just real quick here at the back of the truck. 5-gallon air tank, currently fed by an electric compressor. I might change that at some point in the future, but it's fine for now. Air, of course, powers the air suspension, the transmission range shift, the air over hydraulic master cylinder for the brakes, and this train horn. Air train horn, however, it has an electric valve, and I have the switch mounted in the top of the visor panel in the truck. I'll show you that here in a minute. But, you know, as train horns go, it's pretty small. It's plenty loud, though. Also back here, the 4-inch drive shaft connects the 1710 output yoke on the transmission, huge, to the SPL 100 input on the rear end. And then this piece back here, I do plan to mount a big rig, like a semi-truck 5th wheel hitch. Haven't got to that yet. That'll be one of my projects coming up soon. But this piece back here ties together, I built this custom. It ties together all the original mounts in the frame with the rear suspension and the rear bumper. Ties it all together. Everything is nice and strong. I do plan to eventually create a frame cover over the top of this to kind of tie it all together. But for now, works just fine. These fuel tanks, I've had a lot of questions about the fuel tanks. I searched OEM for something that would work and just really couldn't find anything with the dimensions I needed. So I had these aluminum tanks custom built by Southtown Specialties, 16-inch diameter, 33-inch length, have a capacity of about 27 gallons each. They are both sides are fuel tanks. I do have the suction for the engine coming in here, the return here. They're connected with a balance, a siphon balance hose that keeps them equal. And so far they work great. Plenty of volume for the old Detroit here. And I think they look great too. All right, how about this interior? Spent a lot of time trying to get this just right and really happy with how it turned out. I'll show you just a couple of things here. The dash panel, of course, is an original piece. Had the Diamond T logo printed on the backs of the gauges and really tried to keep the theme of the original gauges with the font and the layout, and really turned out pretty good. That switch panel over there to the left of the steering wheel, I had that laser cut from stainless steel. The switch labels and the Diamond T logo are laser etched. This shift knob is the old style Fuller Roadranger shift knob. Really like how the range shift is on these. Had the Diamond T logo laser etched into the top of that. Same with the horn button here, laser etched the Diamond T logo. But of course the train horn is controlled by the pull switch here. You know, as a kid I was out there trying to get the truckers to honk, and wanted to keep that kind of theme here in the big truck. This is the original Diamond T handbrake lever. And I was able to make use of it, made a custom cable that goes back to the parking brake drum on the input pinion of the rear end. So super happy that I was able to keep that original piece and make it useful for the modern brake. This panel here contains the air suspension control as well as USB charging. I wanted to be able to conceal this panel. It doesn't look Diamond T or 1949, so if you're not controlling the air suspension or charging something, this just tucks away up under the dash like that. Kind of nice to get it out of sight if need be. The carpet and upholstery was installed by Brian Backus in Denver, Colorado. Super happy with how it turned out. I salvaged this bench seat out of a 1987 Ford Ranger. Brian was able to completely rebuild it, and of course this beautiful diamond stitching. I mean, wow, it is beautiful. Seat belts. Truck didn't come with seat belts originally. It's important for me, you know, for the safety of myself and my family. I definitely wanted shoulder belts, and so I was able to figure out how to get them in here. For both sides, there is a third lap belt here in the center. Otherwise, you know, I tried to keep the theme of the original Diamond T, modernize where needed in here. Couldn't be happier with how it all turned out. All right, well, that was a very brief summary of almost 10 years of thought and effort. Impossible to cover everything, so if you have questions about any other parts of the build that I didn't cover, feel free to drop them in the comments. Be happy to fill you in. I've got no secrets here. And also stay tuned, because I'm going to have a lot of cool footage of the truck in action. I've been working on ways to capture high definition audio of the sound of the engine and exhaust and jakes, so you're not going to want to miss that. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.